Hello, world singers. My name is Tyler.
And my name is Brooke.
And this is Cosmere Conversations. We're totally back in here.
It's so good to be back.
Absolutely. It has been a little while. We took a week off for both holiday and professional. Yeah, we just had a bunch of stuff going on, to be honest.
Life
Yes.
reasons.
Absolutely. You guys all have your life reasons too, and
Truth.
we are glad that you took a moment out of your life to download this podcast.
Absolutely.
Because guess what? Oathbringer still exists. It's out there in the universe.
It's in the world.
Yeah. And more people are finishing it and reading it. We'll just thank everybody making our last Oathbringer episode most popular ever.
Yeah, props, guys. My brothers are about to get Oathbringer for Christmas and embark upon this journey, and I'm pretty excited.
I will also say that you got them Oathbringer, or it was like family?
Yeah, it was like a family thing. I have been getting them Brandon Sanderson's books every year for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But I didn't think that they would want to wait for Oathbringer, but they were banking on me getting it for them, which I didn't know until after I didn't buy it for them and I bought them other Cosmere things. But I ran to my mom and was like, "Mom, you have to buy them this book. They're expecting me to. Please buy it."
So when in doubt for last minute gift ideas, and it would be really last minute because this doesn't release until the day after Christmas. So if you...
Well, in time for the New Year or Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa actually starts on the 26th. So if you are celebrating Kwanzaa, I don't know if you give gifts, but if you do and you still need one, Cosmere books are great.
Yeah. And we are going to break down Oathbringer. There was a kind of conversation about how do we want to do this, take it part by part, or... kind of go with bigger themes, but we have decided to talk about specific aspects of the book that we think are super important and try to make the connections that exist to both the in-world Rashar stuff going on and also the larger Cosmere. So we will not necessarily be going in order.
Correct.
We are just talking about what the book had going on. And
yeah, we're just going to kind of pull out some of the larger chunks in terms of either plot points or themes or development on things that we've previously discussed and talk about all of the new things that we know now, how that factors in, what that changes for the Cosmere. And we've reached out to you guys on the social medias, and I took note of everything that you guys said, and we have worked it into our episode plans. So if you reach out to us, we will be talking about your things.
Beginning with Odium and the Oathpact. This book was called Oathbringer, about Dalinar, obviously his sword, Oathbringer. But it also could have been called Odium, or we just learned a whole bunch of new shit about Odium.
Dang, yeah. Odium has been looming so large for so long in the Cosmere, but off screen. Mm-hmm. Oh, man. And getting some good screen time with Odium was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean, for Marvel fans out there in the world, this is like Thanos, who has been hinted at or seen for a couple of seconds in the previous movies. But now, the big one, Infinity War, got his gemstones that he's going after. Thanos is in the Marvel universe. Guess what? Odium is in the Cosmere universe.
Should we just jump right into meeting Odium?
Because meeting Odium is insane. It was one of the moments in the book when I literally had a physical reaction, and I know nobody can see the physical reaction that I did or am about to do, but it's that kind of shaking all over your whole body of just excitement and fear and all emotions just going crazy all at once, and you're shaking your Kindle or whatever device you're reading on, old style books with pages or whatnot, and you're just... whole body is just vibrating with what happens.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I threw the book down and was just it's Odium.
When we meet Odium, Dalinar is reliving one of the visions that were given to him by Honor through the Stormfather, dating back all the way to the Way of Kings. And he's reliving these visions. Sometimes he's sending new people into the visions. But this one is the Day of Recreance at Feverstone Keep. And he's going through the experience. Go ahead.
And it like kind of starts to end, right?
Yes,
it's
where
like,
it should end.
Yeah, coming to an end, and then all of a sudden he's pulled into like a different space.
Yeah, and he kind of like turns around or looks around, and he sees a figure that the physical description is really great and really interesting. Do we want to read...
Yeah.
A bunch of things, so just give people all the info?
I mean, sure, why not?
Okay. Because I think that the physical description is important, and then maybe when other people read it, maybe they saw it differently, but I'll just go with like what
I mean, I think in general, this description is maybe not what we were anticipating.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I think Odium as a whole is not what I was anticipating.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So here's the moment. Dalinar turns around and he says, quote, "A man in white and gold stood there. Dalinar jumped, scrambling backward. The man was old, with a wide, furrowed face and bone-white hair that swept back from his head as if blown by wind. Thick mustaches with a hint of black in them blended into a short white beard. He seemed to be Shin, judging by his skin and eyes, and he wore a golden crown in his powdery hair. Those eyes... They were ancient, the skin surrounding them deeply creased, and they danced with joy as he smiled at Dalinar and rested a golden scepter on his shoulder." End quote.
So we have like a grandfather with joy in his eyes, which I don't know about you, is not how I have ever imagined Odium.
No, and what I saw here is what Dalinar sees as well, is like, oh, this is Honor. And what is Honor like? Well, he's almost splitting image of the prototypical Judeo-Christian god. A older white man with beard, maybe long white hair, crown, or other aspects of divinity, golden scepter. Like, you have this kind of with white cloth.
Yeah, very a classical image.
Yes, and I think that concept of a classical image of God is what Dalinar sees, and he immediately falls to his knees, prostrates himself, and is like, "You are Honor, you are God." And the retort or the response from Odium is so brilliant. Do we want to play this one out? Do you want to be Dalinar or do you want to be Odium?
I'll be Odium.
Okay, you're going to be Odium. Quote,
"I've always been here," God said. "Always with you, Dalinar. Oh, I've watched you for a long, long time."
"Here, you're not the Almighty, are you?"
"Honor? No. He truly is dead, as you've been told." The old man's smile deepened, genuine and kindly. "I'm the other one, Dalinar. They call me Odium." End quote.
So lovely. I'm the other one. They call me Odium.
Dang.
That's the end of part 2. In the book, that climax is part 2.
Oh I lost my mind.
Yeah, and you're just that's the physical reaction that you have.
Oh
and you're just this is Odium, the person that both Dalinar and I, myself, mistake for Honor, this kind of figure of...
Yeah, he's like they said, he's so kindly and genuine and just this just little grandpa, almost like Taravangian.
Yes!
This really nice,
but
just
more
simple
stately.
Old man. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
still that idea of this person that you think of as harmless and kind who has some hidden depths.
Oh, so much depths. And Dalinar, not by choice, but is forced to witness the depths of Odium. And it's important, I think, at this point, to go to the words of Odium about how he describes himself. Because so far, we have heard Odium described by other people, other books or, in world mythology.
Yeah, he's always been described as Odium, which is all hatred.
Hatred was the key phrase that always stuck out.
Yeah, and I don't think we've encountered a shard yet that has sort of disagreed with the name that he has in the Cosmere. But Odium actually defines himself as passion and like the source of all emotion.
Yes, he says, I am emotion incarnate. I am lust, joy, hatred, anger, exultation, glory, and vice. Like, he is every emotion that human beings have, and eventually, we'll also, later in the book, have the reveal that emotion that's so directly tied to the humans on Rashar comes directly because Odium is the humans' god. The shard that was most closely tied to the humans. Not honor, not cultivation.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's been 100% confirmed. We know he definitely has more ties to the humans than we previously suspected.
Absolutely. We don't have all the details, but heavy speculation.
Well, no, because I really think there's like more at play there. I think throughout all of Oathbringer, there are references to like humans being a byproduct of possibly more than one shard, including Odium, but I don't think he's the only one.
Yeah, I had this moment while reading. I forget exactly where it is, but the quote from the book was that like the humans and specifically the Alethi are more warlike than, or more quick to anger, quick to emotion.
Yeah, there's a couple of references to, I think the quote is, the battle rage unique to the Alethi.
Nice, good pull.
And I thought that was interesting too, because I think in general I've been thinking of that battle rage and the thrill being related to the Unmade, which we're going to do an episode about, don't worry guys. But the Unmade is mobile. And so wherever that Unmade is present, there's more thrill present. And so I thought it was interesting that the Alethi themselves are known to be more warlike, because that indicates more stability than what we would see from something coming from the Unmade.
I think it's interesting also how Odium portrays the other shards. Obviously, Honor being dead, but about them, he said, quote, Honor cared only for bonds, not the meaning of bonds and oaths, merely that they were kept. Cultivation only wants to see transformation, growth. It can be good or bad for all she cares. The pain of men is nothing to her. Only I understand. Only I care, Dalinar.
Yeah, I thought that part was really interesting as well, because it really did make me like more empathetic towards Odium, which is weird, right? This thing that you've like been hating for the last 2 books plus throughout the Cosmere. All of a sudden I'm like, oh, actually, like, okay, I see his place in this world.
And it's so important, I think, to have this perspective of the shard themselves. And it reminds me a little bit of preservation, or what I would maybe, I think the reader would probably identify as like the flaw of preservation. Described in Mistborn's Secret History, preservation loved the Lord Ruler. He thought the Lord Ruler was the bee's knees. He's like, this guy is so cool. Why? Because he's preserved. He keeps things the same.
He's keeping everything the same.
And like, Kelsier calls him out on it, and he's like, the Lord Ruler was a tyrant. He was terrible. Like, I overthrew him for good reason. And Preservation was like, yeah, I kind of thought that was a bummer. Like, like that he was like my favorite human, because the shards are so driven by their intent.
Right. Well, and they're meant to all be together, right? When all the shards are together, there is balance so that you have both change and preservation and emotion and rationality, right? So it all balances each other out. But we have this broken God, and so we have extremes, which is never good.
And I think that the idea of all emotion, all passion, all strong feeling being what makes up Odium is so much more convincing as a villain, or as something that's like, you know, true evil, the Emperor in Star Wars, like the Sauron in Lord of the Rings. It's bad. Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
But it also means that the answer is just, oh, well, you need a pure good. You need a Frodo Baggins. You need the Luke Skywalker.
Right. It's a lot more two-dimensional, right?
Yes.
It's flat. You have one person that is all bad. You have one person that is all good. All you have to do is defeat the bad thing, and then, like, yay, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
Easy.
And from Odium's description of himself and his, obviously I don't think that like he's giving the whole truth, but you start to see the significance of what Odium means to the humans in the reveal of the part 4, part 5, you know, the end of the book. This concept that the Voidbringers and the story of the Voidbringers is a story about humans coming to Rashar and bringing with them their god, their shard, Odium. They come from the planet Ashen because of a cataclysm of some type. We still don't know anything about that. And they arrive on Rashar, and it is the listeners who are going to name them Voidbringers. And I think specifically they reference in the Elias Steel, they reference the void specifically tied to Odium. Like Odium is a key part of what they brought along. They brought with them the void, and that void was Odium. Something along those lines.
Now that we know more about how Odium defines himself as well as more as passion of, you know, many different types rather than just as Odium, I think that gives us an interesting insight / clue also into the history of humans, because we have the Thalens, who we hear a lot more about in Oathbringer as being considered heathens. Previously, they believed in a religion called the Passions, which they still sort of use, but they are, you know, they like to put on a front now of being like good Vorin citizens. They really try to push that to the forefront. But culturally, in their history, they believed in something called the Passions. So I'm really wondering if that is like the ancient religion of Odium that they might have brought there with them. But there's a lot of references to that in Oathbringer of people referencing the passions, the different passions that exist in that religion, even the fused. There's one of the fused who she uses the phrase "see passion," like we would say "see reason."
Yeah.
Which I just thought was super interesting and shows you like where people's values are.
Absolutely, and I think that the kind of convincing element that Odium uses is this appeal to the emotion, appeal to pain. Let's talk. Okay, so you said the human history element, and I mentioned the Elias Steel that was the document uncovered or translated, and specifically it was written in the ancient language, the Dawn Chant.
Yeah, isn't it it's the first text that they're able to translate from the Dawn Chant that is kind of one of the side stories in Oathbringer?
Yeah, and so they get this translation because of Dalinar's visions, and he's getting that all written down by Navani, and they are able to translate this ancient document, and it's the document that I think like everyone was like, if we're going to translate anything, let's translate this, because it tells the earliest history that we know of. And this reveal is in the book coming at a specific time, but it's also the same reveal that crushed the Knights Radiant, that created the Day of or led to the Day of Recreance, that Dalinar then has the flashback to and sees at Feverstone Keep, and eventually runs into Odium in that moment. So I thought everything was so beautifully connected because this knowledge that the Elias Steel... Is it the name of the book or the name of the author?
It's the name of the text.
Okay. And when it is revealed to the Knights Radiant, they break their oaths and they give up and kill their bonded spren. And so let's look at that. Let's dive into that kind of big reveal of Oathbringer, discovered in world with the Elias Steel, that human beings are the Voidbringers. Human beings came from Ashen to Rashar and took over this planet. So would you read for us? It's not that long, but just take us through the translated Elias Steel.
Yeah. Quote, "They came from another world, using powers that we have been forbidden to touch, dangerous powers of Spren and Surges. They destroyed their lands and have come to us begging. We took them in as commanded by the gods. What else could we do? They were a people forlorn without a home. Our pity destroyed us, for their betrayal extended even to our gods, to Spren, Stone, and Wind. Beware the otherworlders, the traitors, those with tongues of sweetness but with minds that lust for blood. Do not take them in. Do not give them succor. Well were they named Voidbringers, for they brought the void, the empty pit that sucks in emotion. A new god, their god. These Voidbringers know no songs. They cannot hear Roshar, and where they go they bring silence. They looked soft, with no shell, but they are hard. They have but one heart, and it cannot ever live." End quote.
The humans are the bad guys. That's basically what we figure out. The story that they told themselves of being a people constantly defending their homeland is wrong.
I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily the full picture. You know what I mean? Like, I think I still think they were fleeing some kind of cataclysm, so they were still, like, refugees. They just weren't native to Roshar like they thought they were.
But they're also the conquerors. In my opinion, or my kind of understanding, there's a similar thing going on with, like, American history or colonialist history.
Sure.
Of you came to a land that was filled with people, you know, Europeans to the pre-America, before it was America, and you destroy, both on purpose and accidentally, through disease and stuff, the native populations, and then you recraft the story. And the story of early Americans, if you go read it, it's a city upon a hill. It's so beautiful. It's like we arrived in the Garden of Eden and the forest is filled with food and huge paths are made by God and we just walk through and pick up the food. No, man, you're walking through a garden that was made by Native Americans like for hundreds of years and then they all died because of smallpox or like other diseases. But like you recraft the story for yourself. And that's what the humans did on Rashar, is they removed themselves from any type of like Holocaust or massive war against the native people of Rashar, and they turned it into, we are the native people and we are being attacked.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to the reversal that happens, because we know that at some point Odium became more of the god of the singers and honor and cultivation the humans sort of adopted them more as their god. So there's like this reversal that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested to learn more because that's obviously the kind of aspect that's left up in the air.
Yeah, I'm interested as well because this passage states that when the humans came to Rashar, they were already using powers of Spren and surges. Mm-hmm. However, when I look at the passage we quoted previously from Odium describing honor and cultivation, it seems to me pretty clear that honor and cultivation are the genesis of surge binding, because we have honor, who is all about oaths that you need to become a surge binder, and then you have cultivation, who's all about transformation, which is, again, what happens when you become a surge binder. So
I think it might have something to do with what was mentioned in the Ars Arcanum, which we know is written by Chris, where she mentions that the magic systems that she currently understands are most likely not the only things going on Rashar. She may be hinting at, okay, honor and surge binding is maybe the words that the listeners used, but it could have been another type of magic system. It might not have been the surge binding that we know.
Yeah, because I do think there are different kinds of Spren, and different kinds of Spren involve different kinds of surge binding. Mm-hmm. Because, like, not honor, sorry, Odium says he is the soul of Spren. But then we know for sure that they're honor Spren, and I think previously the singers were bonding with mostly lesser Spren, and then after Odium came and the new god came, they started doing more with the higher Spren. Mm-hmm. That gave them more power, and that's where they get those big forms of power that they eventually walk away from. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm thinking anyway.
I think that's on the money. I think that's right on point. One of the things that is most significant that we find out, first, it's hinted at by the Stormfather when Dalinar kind of questions him. Hey, why did that Day of Recreance happen? Like, what was the big secret that caused everyone to go away? I think previously my biggest speculation was that it was tied to the death of honor. But now what we know, and I still think that the death of honor is like key in the point of like weakening the Knights Radiant, or weakening maybe just allowing Odium to play up the passions more and kind of seep in this information in some way. But the information that humans are the aggressors, not the defenders.
Right, that they're not like the heroes they thought they were. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is such a interesting path to go down in a book or a series that really is about heroes. Like Brandon Sanderson writes heroic epics and heroic stories, and you have all these like great characters that we've talked about, Kelsier and Wax and Wayne, and you have all these characters who are heroes. And then a key aspect of this book is like, you think you're the hero of your own story, but you might not know your own story. Like you don't have the full scope, the full understanding. Yeah. And what you think is heroic, I'm defending my land, I'm holding up the will of honor, and I'm a skybreaker, and I'm a windrunner. It's like, well, maybe at certain points, certain people definitely felt that way, but like at a certain point in the past, those powers, not necessarily the same as surge binding, as we mentioned, but those powers of humans were used as conquerors, as devastators of the native population of Rashar.
Yeah, but I think also it examines, what you do after that when you find out that your history is maybe not exactly what you thought it was, and like, does that make Dalinar evil? well, maybe not. Like, maybe he's going to proceed differently, right? And not just blindly fight the Parshendi and, you know, have more war. Maybe this gives them more impetus to reach out in peace and come to some sort of truce and say, hey, man, I'm sorry our ancestors killed you, but, like, we've been living here for 4,000 years and this is our home too. So, like, can we, you know, get along and share?
I know you just tossed out the 4,000 years. I just want to make clear that it's significantly longer than 4,000 years, because we know that since the last desolation, it's been
I guess that's true. That's
4,500 years, and there were 100 desolations before that.
Well, okay, at least 4,000 years.
Exactly.
Like, they've been around for a while.
And I completely understand your point. I just didn't want to hold that number because we're going to come back to
I mean, I guess I was just thinking modern humans have been on Roshar for 4,000 years.
Yes. And that's true. Since the the last desolation. What I think is so interesting, and just one of those aspects of, like, Brandon, how long have you been planning this out?
Oh my
God,
forever.
It's just because, okay, so the planet that humans came from and may have partially been created by Odium, or partially, or existing without the pre-shards, pre-shattering of Adonalsium. But we know that something happened on Ashen. The humans arrive, and originally the listener, the native race of Roshar, is like, yeah, okay, cool, you're desperate, you're refugees, as you called them, and you can have this territory. It's the territory that is most similar to your homeland, where you are from. It's the territory on Roshar that is furthest away from the source.
The high storms. They're like, oh, look at these poor little soft things. They have no protection. We better give them, like, the easy land.
And that easy land becomes known as Shinovar, where the home of the people, the Shin. And I think that it was on Reddit that you saw this specific, but it's just a great catch, is that, okay, we have the Shin who founded Shinovar, who originally came from the planet of Ashen. They were Ashen. They were Ashen. Yeah. And that, okay, maybe Brandon created all in the past, and, like, hats off to you. Maybe he was just like, this worked out really well. But it seems so perfect.
It's so perfect. And that's, like, that really is how language works. Mm-hmm. Like, it makes sense.
I think that's the best aspect, is, like, that is how language works.
Yeah.
You're like, what are you? Where are you from? How did you get here? Oh, I'm from Ashen. We are Ashen. And they're like, okay, cool, you're Shin. And you can live over there.
He's a Shin.
Yeah, and like, you'll stay over there in your little grasslands because that's similar to you. Specifically, I believe that this is just speculation, but I believe that the original agreement, maybe a treaty of some type, was signed, or just, you know, you've showed up as refugees and we'll give you this little corner. But specifically, the rules that were given to humans, my theory is that the rules were, you are not allowed to leave the grasslands. You are not allowed to walk on stone. Your land has grass, our land has stone. And this would then explain the reverence that the Shin people still place on the stone and
not walking on
not walking on stone. Is like, okay, if they had this original kind of political treaty that eventually turned into a religious mindset, or like some aspect of kind of their culture. Yeah, I was going to say,
because there's a lot of talk about the gods of stone as well, which we really haven't seen. But even in that Ilias Steele passage, saying that the humans betrayed all of the gods, the spren, the stone, and the wind. And we've seen the spren, you know, we know wind, okay, that probably comes from honor, so, you know, that's of God. But
do you think it's a thunderclass?
Well, that's what I was thinking, but I don't think thunderclass existed until after Desolations.
Totally possible. I don't know.
So, and I don't know if that's maybe a reference to cultivation? Just like being of the earth stone? I don't know, but it's mentioned a lot, and we
Or-
don't have a lot of info about it, so I'm curious.
Or because we're gonna find out in this book when it comes to the description of the Oathpact, which we'll talk about in just a moment here, that the listener race has this kind of ability of being the host for reincarnated souls, right? We would call them souls, or are they spren?
No, I think they are souls.
I think they're souls as well, more fully connected through the three realms than just a spren, which would base in the cognitive realm. I think that the ability possibly existed before Odium, maybe.
Oh, definitely. No, I think that's definitely true because, like, in that Elia Steele passage, they talk about how the humans only have one heart and it doesn't live. And so I think the singers are well aware that they have gem hearts that have special capabilities and the humans do not.
So I think it could be then possible that the gods of stone, the gods of the stone walkers, the gods of the listeners, could be what now we call the fused, but were...
No, because I don't think they existed yet.
I don't think they're the same thing, but I'm saying like the ability
I see.
of like a few listeners
to reincarnate. Got it.
And like that could have been the basis of like, oh, these are our gods, is like the ones that keep returning and keep leading us. And then that, we'll call it ability of their race, gets corrupted by Odium, because I think the fused specifically are corrupted.
I mean, we're gonna do a whole episode on the fused.
That's
I don't
true.
want to talk about
we can't
it now.
get into
I haven't
it.
done my research, so I don't want to say anything. I also want to point out that another great little mention in this Elia Steele passage is that we have confirmation again that music theory is correct. She says that the Voidbringers know no songs, they can't hear Rashar, and I just love that image of this whole planet, of like zooming out from this planet, and it is just like making this symphony of all the things on Rashar. It's so beautiful.
Well, and that music theory is 100% on point, and just to kind of re-explain without going directly to, I think it was user Sildaris. Nice. Yeah, we've memorized you.
We like you, dude.
Way to go. Or Dudette, however you roll. The concept was that where in other Cosmere planets, the magic system is based around things like color or metals, on Rashar, everything is based around music and rhythm. And we see this a lot of different areas, and it's basically further investigated, further explored, to the point of like fairly confident that this is where it's going. But the musical association to the planet of Rashar, I felt was very interesting, and there were so many moments when like there were description of light pulsing in a particular way, or feeling a pulse of, whether it's the thrill. There's just like all these descriptions that when you look at it,
there's a lot of references in Oathbringer. I highlighted them.
they're hugely significant, because like, what is the thrill? We've talked about it before, but now I kind of see it as like the thrill is the drum beats of war that you like can't turn off.
Yeah.
That it like, takes you over, of just like this like rhythmic pounding, and like it builds you up to fight.
So then there's a part where I think it's Venli is talking about how the humans don't have songs like the singers do, but she occasionally sees them behave in a manner that is complementary to the rhythms. She's like, they can't hear them, and yet sometimes it almost seems like they're singing along to a particular rhythm without realizing it. And then, so I wonder if something like the thrill, the humans are sort of attuning the rhythm of war or whatever it is, sort of without realizing it and experiencing it and describing it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that that's at least some aspect of what's going on. And it might be that as all people in the Warbreaker, what's the planet?
Nalthis.
On Nalthis, have a breath and are connected to the investiture in that manner. It could be that all beings in the Risharian system are linked to rhythm and this musical connection, and then it's manifesting itself in a bunch of different ways. It's manifesting itself in part as the unmade. Is it Nergal or okay, so, or Molak?
I think so.
It's one of those two. Nergal, I think it's Nergal. Nergal is the thrill, but it's like using this maybe innate Risharian ability of like music and rhythm to control or to change the desire of the people.
Yeah, totally.
Let's turn this into the conversation about the Oathpact.
Yeah.
Because we have this experience of like what we know now about the human history of Rishar. They kind of show up, violate whatever treaty about not walking on stone, my personal theory. But we know that they conquer. And then there's like the hit back when you have the listener race that is now the attacking force, and that's when the humans start to change their mythology around, okay, the Voidbringers are those people over there. They're scary and they're dark, and they are, corrupted and ancient and magical, and you have this turning of the history of the humans to portray them as more of the heroes of their own story. Eventually, this is going to turn into the Desolations. We don't know at what point Odium starts corrupting the listener race or using the listener race.
Yeah, so from the Stormfather, he says, man, we get so much info from the Stormfather in Oathbringer. It's so great. He says, there were many souls of creatures who had been slain, angry and terrible. They had been given great power by the enemy, the one called Odium. That was the beginning, the start of the Desolations. For when they died, they refused to pass on.
So I think what he's describing is the death that was put on the listeners by the humans leads to maybe a weakness of them, but they call out to Odium, I think. Or they kind of, Odium works his way in and starts to abuse and eventually either manipulate this power of a resurrection or create the power of resurrection. I'm not 100% certain, but we know that this kind of ability of returning from the dead and re-inhabiting a new body, or the soul moving from one body to another upon death, is what starts the Desolations and turns what was a war of conquest into more of a fair fight. And that kind of goes on through the Desolations, of which there are 100. So with the beginnings of the Desolations, basically we could consider that like Odium taking the side of the listeners.
Yeah, I wonder if the humans like started taking oaths with honor. And Odium seems like the kind of god, right?
Get jealous?
If he's all passion, he's going to get real jealous about that and be like, fine, I'll go to the Parshmen.
Yeah. I think that is an aspect, but it's not the stuff
yeah, there's
that
definitely
has been
more
explored.
going
Yeah.
on.
I think that once the Desolations have started and you have Odium taking the side of the listeners, that's when you get the call that goes out for mortals to stand up and eventually make what is known as the Oathpact.
Yeah, I definitely think that is the leading into the heralds and the Oathpact, is that the humans are like, okay, well now our enemy has these entities that never die, they just keep coming back. What are we supposed to do? And that desperation causes them to create the Oathpact.
So we did go over the Oathpact briefly in our first Risharian history episode. But very briefly, you had these 10 mortals that were 5 males and 5 females. make a pact with honor, we are under the assumption that this is where many of the surges as we know them now are manifesting in these 10 individuals. Maybe not to start.
Well, no, because I think it comes from the honor blades are like the original sources of the powers.
And then the Spren will mimic those powers and bond with the Knights Radiant.
Yeah.
Okay. The Honor Blades, most likely created by Honor, are given to these champions, which gives them magical powers. But some other stuff goes on, too, with this Oath Pact between the individuals. Yes, they get cool magical powers. Yes, they have Honor Blades. But something else is going on the spiritual and mental side. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So again, we have confirmation from the Stormfather, a little bit more information around the heralds, and one, what exactly they were doing, and two, how they were able to do it. So we know that they began as humans, but at some point became something more than human. And essentially they were tasked with keeping, he says, the spren of the dead and sealing them into damnation. And they were connected to each other in some way. They're able to share the pain that they encounter while performing this feat.
And that idea of sealing the souls in damnation, the ones that can reincarnate and lead the Parshmen, in my opinion, really makes it sound like they are perhaps sealing a perpendicularity, a shard pool, something that would allow transit between Rashar and Braze, thank you so much. The planet that goes by the name Damnation, but the other planet in the Rasharian system. And I think that the concept that these 10 heralds are going to kind of travel to the other side of the perpendicularity and then, stand guard in front of it while they're constantly being attacked by the souls on the other side, the souls of what we come to know in Oathbringer as the fused.
Yeah, and we do know that it's not just a physical torture that they encounter. The Stormfather says that by the end, their souls had worn thin.
Yeah, and so there's some type of link that is done between these heralds by, we're guessing, honor.
Yeah, and we have more evidence of that too when Yezrian is killed.
Yeah.
And Shalash passes out, doesn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
She immediately recognizes.
She physically feels
yes.
something change because they're linked in a very profound way.
And she's never felt anyone die. Any of them. They don't really die as part of the Oath Pact. So they go to the other side, they seal it up, they're tortured and attacked, and eventually one of them breaks, and that begins a new desolation. But they return and lead the humans, and the humans fight off the void, and that's the story that makes up the background of the world of Rashar.
Yeah, so if they come to Rashar and they're literally physically fighting Thunderclass, etc., and one of them dies, is killed by a Thunderclass on Rashar, they don't die in the way we traditionally think of it. They return to Braze. So that's a different feeling than an actual death of one of the heralds. And
so this is kind of what makes me think that we have a known perpendicularity on Rashar somewhere in the Horneater Peaks, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have Dalinar, who in the final battle claps his hands together and merges the three realms into one and recreates Honor's perpendicularity.
Well, but we also have the storms, the high storms. That's a moving perpendicularity.
wait, you can travel as a perpendicularity in the high storm? Or it's just a source of investiture?
I can't remember if that was confirmed or if it's just my theory. But
okay, well, no.
But putting it together from things that various people said about there being, about Honor's perpendicularity being incredibly volatile and dangerous and mobile, like, what else do you think it is?
Yeah, and I think that's good speculation. I forgot about the description of being mobile. But Dalinar is able to create the perpendicularity. And so I kind of think, okay, so stay with me here. Now, post Words of Radiance, we have the Everstorm, which was created by Odium to constantly bring back the fused and reincarnate them with every Everstorm instead of sending them back to Braze. So he found a loophole. By creating the Everstorm, the fuse never go to Braze. They just recycle in the Everstorm.
Oh.
So I'm kind of thinking that what happened to the Heralds might have been that they died and, they fall on the field of battle or whatever, and they might, possibly, don't know this, but they might stay around until a high storm comes. And then that high storm is the perpendicularity that sends them back to Braze.
Although...
Just speculation. I'm just spitballing right now.
It just seems like that would take too much time.
Totally possible.
Yeah.
Because some high storms don't come for multiple days. I was just trying to connect that idea.
Right.
We know that the Everstorm is a type of loophole for the fused. And so...
Could that also be used but on the other side?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I do think that what is significant about the Oathpact is that with each continuing year of torture, with each further desolation, with the extension unnaturally of these mortal beings' physical, spiritual, and cognitive selves, they are deteriorating. Like you said, they're all linked, and all of them are deteriorating at different speeds in different ways, and I think it's affecting all of them. So, like, if you and I were both heralds, and I was more physically strong, and you were more mentally strong, well, my mind might crack first, and then that's going to impact your mind. Yeah.
So my thought is, because we also learn a little bit more about Telenolot in this book, about how, for some reason, we don't know why, he was a herald that was never meant to be a herald for some reason. We get the sense that he was kind of roped into this in some way, and he was sort of the pure one. He's also the only herald that never, ever, ever broke under torture. And so I'm thinking, since he was the one that was sent back to be tortured by himself for...
Well, he died. He didn't voluntarily go
back.
Sure.
But he was the only one there being tortured by himself. And so I'm wondering if that is actually the cause of the heralds on Rashar disintegrating, because they are feeling the after effects, the sort of aftershock of the torture that Telenolot is going through.
I think that is a possibility. I also think that they were specifically warned that if they didn't go back, there would be consequences. So I think that they...
Yeah, but I think, wouldn't you assume those consequences would be like Rashar will be under desolation forever?
No,
or something,
I think that there is a strong likelihood that in the process of creating this like bonded group of 10, there is a kind of all or nothing attitude about it. So like, if basically what happened is Telenolot died, went back to seal up what might be a perpendicularity, and he held out against the torture for 4,500 years, and that's since the last desolation. But in that time period, all of the heralds on Rashar progressively got worse from what was described as their frayed souls by the end of the last desolation. Like, they were real bad at the end of the last desolation, and then they got significantly worse to their current forms. Could that be because they're like linked to Tlenelot's torture?
Yeah.
Possibly. But I also think it could be I think it's more like the effect of not being together rather than simply the torture.
I don't know about that.
I mean,
I
we're
would
just
also
speculating.
say,
There's
though,
no right answer here.
No, yeah, I know. But it could also be, I wonder if it's in relation to the Oathpact. Like, because they're not maintaining their oaths, they are disintegrating?
Completely possible, because there was a passage from the Stormfather in that description when he said, quote, "I long blamed them for their lack of honor. It is difficult for me to look past oaths broken. I hated them. Now, the more I come to know men, the more I remember because of being bonded with Dalinar. The more I see honor in those poor creatures you name heralds." End quote. I think that you're on the right track with the idea that there was a connection to like the violation of the oaths and pissing off the Stormfather, who's not just the Stormfather now. He is also like holding the last remnants of honor. And I guess Dalinar is now as well. And I think that the concept of what we don't have full knowledge of is how exactly did Odium become trapped in this system, what he calls being shackled.
Yeah, we don't know why or really how, but the Stormfather does say that Odium is sealed by the powers of cultivation and honor.
Yes. And so I don't necessarily think that the Oathpact is the same thing that is holding...
Oh, no, it's not.
Yeah,
it's definitely not.
It's like the Oathpact is really about the heralds versus the listeners.
Fused.
Yeah, the fused. And not so much about the larger battle of the shards versus each other.
Right. Like the heralds are more the champions of men.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that this is going to be significant in the future. Like, what exactly did bind or shackle Odium? Because obviously that's the thing that he wants to break. And he was so convinced in this book that he could turn Dalinar, who's bonded to the Stormfather and is now the bearer of Honor's power. And we see this in that first meeting with Odium at the end of part 2, or the beginning of part 3, where Dalinar fumbles. He almost makes a Vin-like mistake.
He's playing a game he doesn't know.
Yes.
He doesn't even know he's playing a game.
Exactly. And I think his response to making this mistake is like, hey, buck up, new recruit. Like, he imagines himself as like a young child again, like learning, the spear or whatever for the first time. And like making a very stupid mistake because you're not paying attention, as young people do. But he is playing a game with a shard, an ancient power, a source. And in his frustration with Odium, and Odium kind of defining, hey man, I'm shackled and I don't want to be here. Like, I just want to get out of my shackles and be all passionate and whatnot. So Odium and Dalinar have this moment when they first meet, and Odium's like, hey man, come sit next to me on this rock. We're just two friends talking. Dalinar's got his guard up, but he's going to make a very basic mistake. You want to do this with me?
Yeah.
We have this quote, do you want to be Dalinar or Odium? I think last time you played Odium, right?
Yeah, I kind of like Odium.
I know, but I like Odium.
Okay,
Everybody
you be Odium.
likes
You be Odium.
All right.
I'll be Dalinar. Quote, so do it. Leave us alone. Go away.
Odium turned to him so sharply that Dalinar jumped. Is that, Odium said quietly, an offer to release me from my bonds, coming from the man holding the remnants of Honor's name and power? End quote.
And Dalinar is like, no.
Definitely not.
Nope.
We need to back this up. Roll back real quick. because he almost stumbled into something.
Like doing the worst thing possible.
Yeah. And Odium then quickly clarifies. He's like, look, I'm not going to trick you, and we believe it's because
and it wouldn't work anyway, is what he says.
He can't trick Dalinar. It's all about the intent. And he thinks that he's going to turn Dalinar and get Dalinar to willingly release him and that be his intent, not to trick him in any way.
Well, is that his intent, or is his intent just that he thinks he will get Dalinar to be his champion? Dalinar will win as Odium's champion, and then Odium will win and like be cool.
Yeah, but I think that Dalinar is still the key to Honor's power, and as you said,
because
Honor
he's
is bonded
to the Stormfather. Got it. Yeah.
So Dalinar is the key, and Odium knows this. He knows he can't trick Dalinar to release his bonds, but he thinks that through his manipulation of Dalinar's emotions, specifically related to Evie and Dalinar's violent past as the Blackthorn, that over time Odium is just going to convert Dalinar to his side, and that's what goes wrong at the end of
Odium, so this is very similar to what we see from Ruin and Vin, right? That Ruin picked her out from the time she was a child and already prepped her so that when the time came, he could use her to his ends. That's basically what Odium tried to do and thinks he is going to be successful at, is that, hey, I handpicked Dalinar. His entire past is littered with my influence, and now at this crucial moment I will be able to fully use the weapon that I have prepared.
And of course that does not go as planned.
It doesn't happen. I was really afraid that it was going to happen.
Yeah, especially when you recognize this moment, and it's like shortly after the moment we talked about as one of our favorite moments, like Dalinar walking out with this book unguarded. And it just reminds me of right before he goes out to meet Odium and he's holding the Way of Kings book, he comes across Lift and he gives her the mission to go do her thing. But he says, "Do you have a weapon?" And she responds with, "No, I never learned how to read." Because he's carrying a book. Thought that the book was the weapon. And he's like, "No, I meant a more traditional one." And then she busts out Wendell, her stick blade.
No, I think it's like just a rod.
Yeah, I think it's a rod with like a cross guard. So it looks like what a kid would make as a sword. Of just like a straight stick with a little cross guard. Yeah. And she's like, "My friend doesn't like hurting things." And then paddles herself away. I mean, Lift is just... the imagery is so great.
So, because Dalinar succeeded in not being used as Odium's champion, he still needs to find a champion, right? Because Dalinar already agreed to a fight of champions. Like, he's in that pact with Odium. But Odium now needs to find a champion.
And so there was speculation in the moment, that other huge moment in the final battle where I think it's Nail and Zeth are flying above the battle, and Nail's like, "You need to choose someone to, not someone."
No, he has to choose his law.
Choose
basically.
his law,
like,
yeah.
What is the law that you are going to swear yourself to and follow no matter what, that's going to define your life? And
he looks down and he sees Dalinar, I think, facing off with Odium. And in that moment, I'm like, oh no, he's going to become Odium's champion.
Me too, I thought that.
And then he doesn't. He becomes Dalinar's best friend, and like... Another moment.
Zeth is anyone's best friend. He's going to be the creepy shadow of Dalinar.
Nightblood's best friend, possibly.
I don't know. I think Nightblood and Lift are now best friends.
That trio fighting was
so cute.
Fantastic.
I love their trio.
The question of like who is Odium's champion will probably be the focus of book 4. Or at least in the background of book 4, and then conflict in book 5.
Yeah.
I think that, for me, the one who is most likely to become Odium's champion, just from what I saw, is Moash. Moash has this conversion built on his own history, but he figures out the story too, right?
Yeah.
From the
fuse,
the fuse, they tell him the real story, and he basically makes the decision.
Does he? Hold on, I'm trying to remember now. I don't know if he does, or if it's just based on conflating the enslavement of the Parshendi and the Parshmen with the way that dark guys are treated. And so he sees them and he's like, yeah, I know how you feel. And so he sides with them because he identifies with them.
That's what I can't 100% remember. Listeners, help us out on the Twitter or whatnot.
Sorry.
Specific point that we did not remember from the book. It's totally fine. Did Moash know about the history of humans, or is he making it, like Brooke said, based on this decision of kind of class injustice?
Just like, siding with the underdog, sort of.
Yeah, absolutely. Siding with the slaves in many ways, which he was, and makes sense.
Right, yeah.
And so, obviously, going forward, the champion of Odium may not be a character that we know.
Do you think that it could be Taravangian?
No, I think that what Taravangian promised at the end of the book to Odium is that he would be an agent of Odium, that he would specifically have the diagram work for Odium.
Right. He just takes sides.
Yes, he picks the side of Odium, but he also kind of clearly says, you need a champion, and then doesn't say, like, I am that champion or anything like that.
Right.
In exchange for the protection of the people of Kharbranth and anyone who was born.
It's such a stupid deal.
It's like, what are you gonna do with nothing around Kharbranth, dude? You gotta trade and
he also
crops.
It's like just Kharbrantians and their spouse, not even the kids. Like,
I think your
grandkids are gonna die.
I think it's in the spirit of anyone who is born in Kharbranth or their spouse.
No, it's and.
And their spouse. Yeah, absolutely. So it's anyone born in Kharbranth and their spouse, even if the spouse wasn't born in Kharbranth, and their kids. I think. Obviously,
okay.
Odium does not play by the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law.
Right.
So he would not be trying to make that type of
fine line that's true.
Distinction. He's not a genie type character who's like, what exactly did you say?
Or a skybreaker.
Yes, who are far more about the letter of the law. I think that the concept of Odium's champion is kind of like what we're looking for next out of book 4 and book 5, and how that champion comes to face off with Dalinar, and how obviously our friends gain more power to, so much happened in this book that you're almost like, what happens next? And I don't know, but we can keep exploring Oathbringer.
Oh yeah, we will be able to pick this book apart for a long time. There's a lot in there.
It's only like 1,200 pages.
Oh gosh.
I think that one of the things that we are going to really explore is the Unmade and the Mystica epigraphs, and we're also going to dive into the letters from Hoid to, we believe, different shards like Harmony. So those are what we got coming in the next couple of weeks. We wanted to just make a quick footnote about pronunciation, which is not really my specialty, but pretty much the entire episode we were pronouncing the Elia Steele wrong. Brooke, what's the actual pronunciation?
Yeah, so I think it should actually be Isla Steele. On a second glance, it's actually spelled E-I-L-A, which I would guess is Isla.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of, I don't know, dyslexia or something, mixing up that L and I.
Understandable.
It's an easy one to mess with, but just for all the purists out there.
Just wanted to clarify.
Absolutely. Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death.
Strength before weakness.
Journey before destination.